In this webinar, we have to say a legal statement. All statements expressed by Getúlio Vargas Foundation employees and guests in our online event and broadcasts exclusively represent their opinions and not necessarily FGV's institutional position. We also reiterate that everyone present here agreed to participate in this event of their own free will, and they consented to be recorded in this broadcast, which will be posted later on FGV's official channels. Professor Flores and Sir Desmond charged the affairs of Singapore Embassy in Brazil. Thank you very much for your presence at this webinar. Sir Desmond joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs upon graduation from the National University of Singapore in 1994. In 1997, he was assigned to the Singapore Permanent Mission to the United Nations in New York. In 1998, he was posted to the Singapore Embassy in Tokyo as First Secretary. He served as Deputy Director in the ASEAN Directorate and as Deputy Chief of Mission at the Singapore Embassy, Saudi Arabia. Now I'd like to thank for the presence of the Professor Flores, the Director of the FGV International Intelligence Unit and teacher in the Graduate School of Economics, also at FGV. The Focus on Asia project aims to offer the public a magnifying glass to see relevant issues about countries that stand out in Asia, offering a comprehensive view of the diverse opportunities, problems, partnerships, and differences between our country and Asian nations. And today, our focus is on Singapore. In 1950, Singapore was one of the poorest regions in the world, a small island at the southern tip of Malaya with less than 2 million people, a British colony, and occupied by Japan during World War II. However, in less than 40 years, there has been a major economic transformation in the country. And today, it is among the 10 richest countries in the world, which one of the best HDIs on the planet, becoming one of the most important financial centers in Asia. In 1960, its GDP per capita was $428, and currently that figure is more than $65,000. Few countries have managed to achieve such a level of economic development. An example of this is technological progress and innovation, which have played a central role in economic progress. As technology advances and innovation-based growth strategy offers greater potential for economic growth. We also know Asian economies, such as South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore, have transformed their industrial performances through scientific and technological policies. Singapore is now able to compete consistently and successfully on a global scale in an increasing number of industries. Now, I have 3 questions, Sir Desmond, for you. In your opinion, was this the result of a commercially relevant technology investment policy? And how have you been able to make such a successful technological transition? And the last one, how did your country achieve all of this?
Good morning, Ms. Mariana Trigo, and good morning to you, Professor Renato Flores. First, I want to thank you very much for giving me and the Singapore Embassy this privilege to speak to the foundation, FGV, and it's an honor for me. And so I want to, without further ado, address the question that you've posed to me. Well, after attaining independence in 1965, Singapore faced many severe economic challenges. A separation from Malaysia meant that we lost a common market and a hinterland. We had no natural resources nor domestic industry at that time. Paradoxically, this total dependence on the outside world forced us to look beyond and consider how we could be a relevant and useful player in the global economy. And so the government made two strategic decisions. First was we abandoned import substitution, which was then a strategy used by many countries in Southeast Asia at the time of their independence. And we went in favor of export-oriented industrialization. The second was to attract global multinational corporations to invest in Singapore and use their presence to foster industrial growth. The idea was that these organizations would bring expertise and capital to Singapore. They would grow our industries and create jobs for Singaporeans. So we developed industrial land, we built infrastructure, facilities, we reformed labor laws, invested in basic education, and emphasis on technical skills training. So industrialization began in the early 1970s. By the late 70s, we had transitioned to manufacturing value-added electronics, petrochemicals, even precision engineering. And in fact, by the 1980s, Singapore had become the world's largest producer of computer hard drives. During this period, we pushed for the financial sector to play a key role in supporting the industries. So we welcomed the entry of foreign banks, we ensured the transparency of the banking system. And in fact, today, as you mentioned, Mariana, we have become one of the top 3 financial centers in the world. And we are also a major wealth management center. From the 1980s onwards, the rise of the services industry has greatly contributed to our economic growth, and in fact makes up nearly 30% of Singapore's GDP, gross domestic product, today. I would also say that trade is the lifeblood of the Singapore economy. Trade is 3 times the size of our national GDP. So that tells you how important trade is to Singapore. From the beginning, we have advocated free trade, which attracted foreign investors to set up business in Singapore. Together with a zero tolerance policy for corruption and low taxation, many multinational companies chose Singapore as their regional headquarters for Asia. However, like many other countries, Singapore faces disruptions caused by new technologies and changes in the global competitiveness environment. We have domestic challenges such as increased social spending due to an aging population, the need for affordable housing, and also skills training and retraining of the workforce. A priority for Singapore is to maintain our pro-business environment. My Prime Minister Lee has noted that the emergence of new and disruptive digital technologies is reordering social and economic structures and affecting the geopolitical landscape. To survive and thrive, Singapore must build up deep digital technology capabilities so as to stay relevant and competitive as an economy. Those are his own words. To this end, we are transitioning to an innovation-based economy and investing in innovation and high-value segments, leveraging on our competitive advantage in business confidence, a highly qualified workforce, and protection of intellectual property. To achieve this, Singapore has actually launched the National Artificial Intelligence Strategy to transform 5 key areas of our economy. They are transport and logistics, smart cities, healthcare, education, and safety and security. And we have to consistently move up the value chain in the global economy. This means that Singapore is consistently investing in new technologies and infrastructure to improve productivity and output. However, just as important is the focus on human resource development. We continue to invest in education, training, and retraining of the workforce, because we believe that workers have to be adaptable and comfortable with moving from one career to another.
Professor, would you like to say something?
Yes, I would like to add a few words to the wonderful answer by Mr. First of all, welcome to everybody. It's a great pleasure for us to hold this one more event of Focus on Asia. This, as the presenter said, is a main thrust of our unity. We think that Asia is a very important region of the world, and we truly believe that, most unfortunately, Brazil is still knows very, very scarcely the Asian continent. That's why we started this year with this monthly meeting with representatives of Asia in Brazil. All of them have very kindly accepted our invitations and offered themselves to talk about their countries. So I would say that today it's not me who should speak, it's not I who should speak, but Mr. Desmond, because we want to hear Singapore. We want that the whole audience learns about Singapore. So thank you very much once again, Mr. And it's a difficult name. I'm trying. I know I'm killing the Mandarin pronunciation, but I'm doing that. As I said, I hope your family ancestors forgive me, but I like.
You're doing fine, Professor Renato. You're doing fine.
Many excuses, but I think that until the end of the talk, I'll be less worse my pronunciation. But I would like to profit from your answer to a few things. I've been several times to Singapore, and I had the pleasure, for instance, to make friends with Mr. Philip Yeo, who was a key name in the development of Singapore in the strategy, for instance, of the technological poles you had in Singapore. Mr. Ye worked very closely to the father of your country. I also had the honor to meet the Honorable Lee Kuan Yew, and I know he was an instrumental figure in all this pursuit regarding technology and the development of Singapore. And I remember that you had one of the several policies you used. You had a policy of technology poles, so concentrating each time in a specific top technology, electronics, biotechnology. At the time I was talking with Philip, he was concerned in creating a huge biotechnology pole, very important. Now, from what you've said, I figure that you are also developing a kind of artificial intelligence pool, which I think is very important. Just for the record, out of curiosity, you at the time, you also, I think you have nowadays, you had a think tanks pool. You even, the Singapore enterprise you have here in Sao Paulo, even offered us a space, a building, a small building. They had a very interesting idea. The pool was made out of blocks. In each block, you had buildings. So you rented the building to a think tank, or two or three, depending. They had 2 or 3 floors. The blocks had common facilities, very good computer room, library and all that, and you had a central facility with more sophisticated services providing to the whole block. It was very interesting. There were incentives, for instance, I don't remember, but you did not pay rent for the first 2 or 3 years and all that. So very clever policies. What I would like to highlight is that Singapore always developed very clever policies, really attractive to foreign business. So we are in the business of education, we are in the business of think tanks, and we received an offer from Singapore to see the broad mind of the country and how they cared. Once they spotted someone or a provider with quality, they made an invitation. And usually they had a nicer spot to offer them. So this is very important. You must have the courage to do this, and you have to be competent to do this. So that's something that I would like to highlight, which was very important in the development strategy. The other thing that Mr. Desmond pointed out, and you've, from I saw in your CV, you also served in Japan, and we know that Japan, people forget, is a main financial power, still is one of the main financial powers. You take the ranking of the 10 biggest banks in the world, you find Japanese banks. They're very powerful in this, but Singapore also made this very shrewd development of the financial sector in such a way that, as Mariana and Mr. N pointed out, nowadays they are a financial center. If we think about, I studied for some time also this, and I have my bias because I'm a Dragon City fan. I'm a fan of Singapore, but the key financial centers in Asia are Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And well, this dynamic Singapore can become number 2, perhaps is already number 2. As some people used to say that Singapore had already surpassed Hong Kong, but they are very discreet. I see that my friend Desmond is discreetly smiling. So they are very cool. They don't want to be number 1, and many times they are number 1. So this is very important because you have this area. Singapore, let's never forget, is a member of ASEAN and of RCEP, this recent outstanding integration, including China, Japan, Korea, fantastic, Australia, New Zealand, and ASEAN. Singapore is a very important clearinghouse in that area, including China. China needs external clearinghouses. So Singapore also was clever enough to see that there was a need of a financial pool in that area beyond, because Hong Kong and Shanghai are Chinese cities. So you had something outside China. And of course, Japan has a different financial strategy. It's powerful, but it's in the banking sector is a bit different, the Japanese strategy. So in Singapore, you have a stock market and you have a financial pool, which was very important and transformed, is one of the things also that transformed the Dragon City into a key location. Because many operations nowadays, and I'm not talking about the port and all that, otherwise the interview is with me and not with Mr. N. But I'm not talking about trade and port, I'm talking about finance. So this kind of clever way, very wise, of spotting, devising the opportunity, and then creating in a discreet but very efficient way the ways that it can become attractive, it can grow. To me, this is very Singaporean. It's something that we must study, we must learn, and made this miracle, because Singapore is a miracle. Look at the size, as we said, when they lost the internal market, when there was the split with Malaysia, and they reinvented themselves completely. I think this is the first big message. And I don't know whether Mr. Desmond would like to compliment, say something else about the technological poles and this thing that nowadays Singapore is a financial hub in Asia, and very important even for China. Despite Shanghai and all that, the Chinese need financial hubs outside to work with them. So I don't know whether Mr. Desmond would like to add something about this.
Thank you, Professor Renato, for those insightful comments. I would just add that I think it all boils, the approach that Singapore takes all boils down to the time of our independence, where we had nothing. And so, I like to use the phrase adversity focuses the mind. We were in such adverse circumstances that we had to be very focused on what we had to do to survive. It was, as they say, swim or sink, and we had to swim very hard, and find the float to keep us alive in that ocean of adversity. And so I think it boils down to that approach. We have always taken the mindset that nobody owes us a living, and we will, let's just say, we will perish if we do not do something about it. And so right from the start, and we always, as the, you've mentioned that the founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, he told his people that we have to stay relevant. If we are not relevant, we become irrelevant, and everyone will forget about us, because we're a small country with no natural resources. And so I think that's generally the approach. That approach has informed the way we moved, the way we developed our economy, to always look for something that will keep us relevant and useful, so that people, countries want to deal with us, because there's no reason for them to deal with us if you can't offer anything to them. I think I would just like to put it that way.
Yeah, but I think that you were very brave. We can perceive from what you said, because you were enduring sheer adversity, and out of adversity you made out progress, you made out wealth. You were very brave, intelligent, and hardworking. And also you mentioned in your answer, it allowed me to highlight a very important thing, that Singapore always paid attention to the quality of human capital. You said, that's very interesting, that even now you are using digital techniques and you are worried in retraining the workforce. That's very important. And also in the civil service. If you allow me, it's a joke, but I think it's an important joke. When I talked to the Honorable, the late Lee Kuan Yew once, and we were in a conversation, there were other people, and someone mentioned the salary paid to the ministers of the government. And they earn, it's not normal salaries, but they are very well paid. So the size of the salary was comparable to a very good salary in the private sector. And I was amazed. I said, well, that's a fantastic salary. And I remember that the late Lee Kuan Yew, he said this thing I never forgot. He said, if you give peanuts to your ministers, you have monkeys as ministers. And we want high quality ministers. So if you pay peanuts, you have monkeys as ministers. So there was this clever policy of valuing the quality of human capital. And it's no problem. I want you to be a very good minister. I'll pay you well. Comparatively to what you are competent, you can have this salary in the private sector. You will have a similar salary, perhaps not exactly the same, but you have a very decent good salary in the public sector. So there are several micro policies that are very important. And this created this dedication. All civil servants from the Singaporean government I talked, there were people highly engaged, highly dedicated, and high-level people. So I think this, as a first message, it's very important that people go to read, get to know the Singaporean experience. Well, Mariana, please, sorry.
Thank you, Professor. Accompanying this growth, there is also an increase in investment in efficiency infrastructure, such as telecommunications and air, sea and land transportation, to support manufacturing activities. Are there incentives for investment within a simplified structure to facilitate access to capital and future progress? Mr. Desmond.
Thank you, Mariana. Well, actually, Singapore ranks second on the Global Ease of Doing Business Index. And this is, due to the pro-business ecosystem that we have established. In Singapore, it is actually possible to register and set up a business in a single day. And we have online portals that serve as one-stop shop for businesses to apply for necessary licensing, resources to seek legal and accounting advice, and even to apply for business grants. Also, we provide tax incentives for certain industries. And so companies that meet the necessary criteria will be able to enjoy tax rebates. And I think that's very useful to, for attracting businesses to set up presence in Singapore. So that's my short answer to your question.
Excellent. Now I would like to start connecting the Singapore experience with Brazil. We know there is an important relationship between the administrative organizations who write the policies and the institutions who manufacture and market the products. Can we ask, is Brazil involved in a development strategy with Singapore? And if not, what does Brazil need to do to be included in this kind of strategy?
Actually, well, Singapore and Brazil, we collaborate on quite several areas. In one area that we have been collaborating on is intellectual property rights. The Brazilian National Institute for Industrial Property and the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore have a memorandum of understanding that was signed in 2019 to establish cooperation in intellectual property and innovation. They have a program that allows patent applications from Singapore to be accelerated in Brazil and vice versa. There are also technical exchanges, mutual support for innovation-related initiatives, and cooperation programs to advance the interests of innovative enterprises in both countries. In fact, the FGV, Getulio Vargas, your foundation, and the National University of Singapore, of which I am an alumni, we have a partnership agreement. And they are actually exploring the possibility of student exchange programs. One big challenge, of course, is the distance between Singapore and Brazil. A normal flight with transit to get to Brasilia takes about 32 hours. And, that's always been, kind of a challenge, to closer interaction between our two countries. Well, technology can help to bridge that gap, but still, there is a challenge, and we have to work to overcome that, to bring about greater familiarity between our two countries. We also, the National Institute of Education in Singapore also has a memorandum of understanding with the Arten Sena Institute, and that is for conducting teacher training programs. In fact, Singapore is going to host a big event in July called the Asia Tech at Singapore event. And I have the honor of actually extending an invitation to our communications minister, Mr. Fabio Faria, to attend in this event, because this is a major flagship event in Asia, where technology intersects with society and the digital economy.
Okay, Mr. Desmond. Professor?
Yes, I would like to add a complementary question to Mr. Ng. I know that you have many outstanding service firms working here. For instance, as regards technologies for offshore platforms, and ports, there are Singaporean firms active here in Brazil. Also, very specific technology regarding airports, control of the landing lane, very, very sophisticated technology. I think also that you manage, or you share the management of a few Brazilian airports. Would you elaborate a bit on this? Because you're very competitive in offshore platforms and port services. And how do you see how do you see the Brazilian market? You think that the market is already full, or are there opportunities on this sector or other specific sectors, if you like, just to give a more concrete picture of certain activities of Singaporean business here?
Thank you, Professor Inato. Yes, we do have about slightly more than 50 companies operating in Brazil. We don't talk very much about them, but I would just name the two big ones. One, of course, is we have a Keppel shipyard in Angra dos Reis in Rio de Janeiro, where you are. And yeah. I've had the privilege of visiting. It's a beautiful shipyard. The waters are clear. You see fish, and sometimes you see dolphins. So lovely place. We have been there for a long time, since about 2014, and so that's helping out in the oil and gas business. So that's a very big investment. We also have a shipyard in Espírito Santo, the city of Veracruz. That is another company, but we are also in, because we are quite big in the shipyard in the industry, and they have a big shipyard there. So I do keep in touch with them, and just to find out how things are going. And so that's two big investments that we have made in Brazil. We also, as you mentioned, Professor, we managed a Galeão International Airport in Rio de Janeiro, and that, of course, is the second largest airport in Brazil, and we've had the privilege of managing it, and that is where our expertise is. Port management and airport management, as you know, Singapore Airport has consistently been ranked the best or among the top 3 airports for the last decade. So we've endeavored to bring our expertise out, because we also realize that our economy being small, we can't just be staying there. We need to venture out. And our corporations, where we have the necessary expertise, we need to venture out. And so we've taken that big jump, and it's a challenging jump because, as I had mentioned earlier, Brazil is so far away from Singapore, and so sometimes people think, distance leads to a certain sense of, I guess, trepidation and fear, of what's out there. We don't know Latin America, but we have to know Latin America because there's such, this is a big region and it's booming, and the potential is there. So we have to come out. Of course, you need to convince. We are bureaucrats. We can convince them, but as we say, the decision is the businessman. They have to take that final decision because it's their money that they're investing in. But we do our part to facilitate, and to encourage them and provide them with the information that they need. And so in that sense, as you mentioned earlier, we have Enterprise Singapore. Their office is in Sao Paulo. There's also another agency, we call it the Economic Development Board. They are both in Sao Paulo, and I keep in touch with them. I coordinate my work with them, and because one of the key elements of our job at the embassy here is to promote, economic and business cooperation between our two countries. And so I would just maybe keep to that, Professor, because there are, of course, other things, and we have some other firms, but those are the big ones.
Yes. Well, I'm going to ask you a question, which I haven't asked it. So I ask you, it's a question, but I did not ask this question, and you don't need to answer. So you feel free. The question is the following. Are you happy with your ventures here? Would you, in an open and of course diplomatic talk, would you have some a suggestion or any comment that you would like to pose in terms of improving the relationship, or in terms of the operation of the whole business? Would you have something to say? But please, I haven't asked you the question, so you don't need to answer. Feel free.
Thank you, Professor. No, we are happy. In fact, I was very surprised to find out that this year, 2020, not this year, 2020, Brazil became the largest trading partner for Singapore in Latin America.
Yes.
So I was surprised because I thought that the pandemic had kind of disrupted the trade, things, and global supply chains have been affected. But as you may know, Brazil is the single largest exporter of frozen meat to Singapore. We import so much meat from Brazil, because it is good, it is reasonably priced, and the supply chain has not been disrupted in spite of the pandemic. So that has been a boom for us. For a population of 5.5 million, we eat a lot of meat. so that it has been a welcome, and I think that's the main reason why Brazil has actually become our largest trading partner. It used to be just the third largest, but it's become the largest. So certainly, there's so much opportunities for us to, increase our trade, our economic cooperation with Brazil. And I think what we need to do is just to continue to familiarize, our businesses with each other. Brazil, well, certainly the big major Brazilian companies like Petrobras, Vale, I think it's BRF. You say BRF, which is your food. Yeah. They're all in Singapore. And I think
there are lots of companies there.
Yes, a lot of Brazilian companies.
Yes, the agribusiness. So they use Singapore as a platform for Asia.
That's right. Yes.
Right.
So definitely, very good. It's a good relationship. We want to improve on it. And like I said, some of the challenges will be the distance, the lack of familiarity. We need to overcome all that. But that takes time, and that takes more interaction between the two sides.
Just two additional remarks on what you said. Excuse me, Mariana. One is the following regarding trade, because this is another example of how clever you are. You have the best port facilities in that area. You take all the ASEAN countries, you have the best port facilities, more modern, efficient, fantastic. Moreover, you are in the Malacca Strait. So the Malacca Strait is there. You just arrive in Singapore and you face the Malacca Strait, which is the passage, is the key choke point for geostrategy in Asia. You are there in the Malacca Strait and you have outstanding port facilities. Well, the result of the combination of these two things, and this was very clever of the Dragon City, is that you also work, and please correct me if this isn't the case anymore, but you also work as an importing platform for other Asian countries. So many times a Brazilian exporter wants to export something to Indonesia, but it's easier to send it, to ship it to Singapore, and then from Singapore, very easily, the merchandise will find its final destiny in Indonesia, even in Malaysia, or even, I don't know, Vietnam or Thailand. So, and this is a problem when we study trade with ASEAN, because not only, as you said, our bilateral relations are increasing, that's true, but also you act as this platform. So I'm afraid that part of this meat, of course you are a wealthy country and you like Brazilian meat, and I hope with the excuse of my dear friend from Argentina that you buy Brazilian meat and not Argentinian meat. There are very good meat house from Argentina in the center of Singapore. I myself have been in some of them. You need a Brazilian churrascaria there. But I think that maybe part of this meat is passed away, passed to other countries. Maybe part goes to Indonesia, also and other ASEAN countries. So you have this platform role, which I think it's very clever. The merit is yours because you have the best facilities. It's more economic. It's less expensive to ship things to Singapore than to other destinations. This is a very key point. I don't know if you want to elaborate on this. The other point is regarding communications. This is more a question to you because the pandemic changed everything. But Singapore Airlines had a very nice flight. I flew in the inauguration flight of that, which was a direct flight, Singapore, São Paulo, if I'm not mistaken, with a stop in Barcelona. No, it made Singapore, Barcelona, and São Paulo. Of course, now with the pandemic, I think this flight is closed. I don't know. Is it working? And if it is closed, is that the idea to reopen this flight as soon as possible? So this is just a curiosity. I don't know.
Thank you, Professor. Well, a response to your first point is that I think, yes, as you rightly pointed out, we have made ourselves, I suppose the word is indispensable, by making ourselves a hub, a transport hub, a connectivity hub. So it just makes more sense for people, if you're a businessman, to just ship or export your product to Singapore and let the people in Singapore redistribute it to the Southeast Asian countries, because it's just so much easier. It's faster to get it to Singapore because the ports move things faster, and it's probably less expensive. And so in that sense, again, it boils down to the point that I made earlier, is that we make ourselves relevant and useful, so that you have to work with us and do business with us. And I think that's a great point of the leadership, and I can appreciate that. So that's just a response to your first point. Your second point, which is a question, yes, it's true. Singapore Airlines, Singapore Airlines is of course among the top airlines in the world, but they are run. You might think that because they are called Singapore Airlines as a national airline, they are run like any profitable business. If once they realize that they're not making money, they make a quick business decision. I was based in Saudi Arabia, as Mariana mentioned, and I had the misfortune of seeing Singapore Airlines can stop their flight to Riyadh. And when we asked, yes, that was in 2014, 2015, I think. And when we asked them why, they said, well, we're not making money. We're not making money. The flights are going there, but we're coming back half empty, and we cannot afford that. I know of many airlines that sort of do like quote unquote national service. Even if they are losing money, they fly. Singapore Airlines doesn't do that. Some people don't like that kind of answer, but they base their decisions clearly on business, profit. It's a purely business decision. And in the case of Brazil, I think that they reached a point when they realized that they were not making money. This Singapore, Barcelona, Sao Paulo flight was not making money. And I think it also has to do with some of the rules of aviation, where they have fifth freedom rights, and where you sometimes you're not allowed to pick up passengers at transit points. And so those rules hampered, the profitability of the airline. And so Singapore Airlines did what they usually do. They're not making money, they cut the flight, which was of course sad for all of us. Yeah. So now I have to fly a foreign airline to go back to Singapore.
It's another sign of how clever you are. Fine.
Well, it's business, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
It's a great conversation. Mr. Desmond, what are the country's efforts to develop links with other nations outside Asia? As Professor Flores said before, are there interests from Singapore in Latin America, especially in Brazil, for new business and research expansion that contribute to this growth?
Thank you, Mariana. We have been working on developing economic and trade linkages to allow businesses in Singapore and Brazil to benefit from such cooperation. So one very good example is the ongoing negotiations on a Singapore-Mercosur free trade agreement. Singapore has many free trade agreements with the US, with Japan, with China. We believe in free trade agreements. Like you said, we believe in the virtue of free trade. And so with Mercosur, that's just the latest in a series of free trade agreements that we have negotiated with many different countries of the world. So that's going on well, and we hope that it can be completed by the end of this year. Another agreement that we have with Brazil is that of the avoidance of double taxation agreement. That will help to reduce and simplify the tax burden on Brazilian businesses in Singapore, as well as Singapore businesses in Brazil. Now that agreement has actually been signed. It's going through ratification. In fact, Brazil has ratified it and Singapore is about to do so. And it will come into effect in January 2022 next year. So that's great. It's great news for the businesses of both countries. And actually, Singapore is also almost finalizing our negotiations for a free trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance, because you mentioned Latin America, so I had to look beyond Brazil. Yes. And of course, we as you know, Pacific Alliance is a free trade agreement between the 4 countries of Mexico, Peru, Colombia, and Chile. And we are, in a way, linking up with both Mercosur and the Pacific Alliance, covering the whole of Latin America. And in this way, we are gradually expanding our trade and investment networks throughout the whole of Latin America.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to the teacher for the next question.
Yes, I would like to compliment on these issues, coming back to the financial sector, Mr. Desmond. You had pointed out that the country makes an effort to be attractive, which is quite fair and quite important. So, for instance, your level of taxation is quite reasonable if we compare with other developed countries. This puts you not exactly, but you share a few characteristics with other countries in the world. Even the European Union, for instance, the Netherlands, is an extremely friendly country in terms of business and banking operations. Of course, we know that Switzerland also has an attractive legislation. We know that this kind of behavior, which I personally think is completely valid in the capitalist world, in the good sense of the word, sometimes Brazilian financial authorities looked with a certain suspicion to Singapore. Well, it's a country that is too lax in terms of taxation. So I remember that there were certain, let us say, undecided views from the Brazilian financial authorities as regards Singapore. I know the situation has evolved. You just mentioned, which is very important. I remember when the negotiations about the double taxation agreement began, so I'm very happy that they have been fixed. How do you see the position of Singapore, not only in terms of Brazil, but globally, is a country which is, let us say, very convenient to the enterprise, which I have to repeat, I find it fair. Do you think that you have sometimes problems with this, you feel comfortable. I see that you are very patient. I remember I participated in some discussions with the Brazilian authorities, and I remember that you take it very cool. You are very confident of your position. So this package of attraction, and it's your right to have this package of attraction. It's very, it's part of your policy. So how would you comment a bit about this? How do your government see this? You are comfortable. Of course, you have customers everywhere, not only in Brazil. You have to attract people from Asia and all that. How do you see Singapore's position in this area, in the financial area? Could you elaborate a bit on this? Of course, up to your will and your limits.
Thank you, Professor. Well, I have to say I'm not an expert in this issue, in taxation. So I wouldn't be able to go into detail, but I would say that, yes, certainly we do have our fair share of challenges, especially given the fact that we have a very attractive tax regime, which attracts a lot of corporations. And it has been like that since the time of independence. We've always made it very attractive so that people want to invest in companies want to invest in Singapore. And in fact, a lot of businesses, if you are in the new industries and we want you to invest in Singapore, we give tax rebates. You don't have to pay tax for like the first 5 years, which is very attractive for a big company. Yes. And of course, in this increasing competitive global environment, we have our fair share of critics, who question us. But we have always maintained that, our system is very transparent, and we are always very prepared. If you have questions, you have doubts, our people are very willing to talk. And in fact, as you alluded to, the fact that Brazilian financial regulators did have some concerns, and we were able to engage in a very frank and candid discussion with them for a few months, if I'm not mistaken. And finally, we're able to, come to a conclusion. We had an agreement, and which is why we then decided to embark on negotiations for the bilateral avoidance of bilateral tax, double taxation agreement. So in that sense, yes, we are always very prepared to talk. If you have your concerns, we'll talk, and we invite officials, to come to Singapore, and even to see, the way we run, our institutions, the way we run the banks, and we have been able to manage that. So I would say yes. It's always, once in a while it comes up as an issue, but we are very prepared to talk about it because we don't see that there's anything that we need to sort of hide. We just explain our policies and explain the rationale behind it, and very often we are able to reach a satisfactory conclusion with the other party.
Wonderful. That's what I expected. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Desmond, changing the subject to a universal theme, Singapore has been very successful in combating the coronavirus pandemic. So much so that Time magazine cited the Prime Minister of Singapore as an example to be followed. Last week, the German biotechnology company BioNTech announced that it will create, by the end of this year, a local center and a new production unit for its vaccines in Singapore. This center will be able to quickly fight future epidemics. For Singapore, why is the investments in health research important?
Well, healthcare is a very important area for the economy. The pandemic has shown that greater investments in health infrastructure, research and technology will put us in a better position to withstand the impact of such crisis and make us more resilient as a country. So Singapore has focused on this area for a long time. And in fact, we have an international research and development hub for biomedical sciences. It's an area called Biopolis, and Biopolis allows pharmaceutical and biotech companies to be situated close to each other so that they can facilitate the exchange of information and benefit from a shared common infrastructure. And so this is one area that the government believes will see has potential for growth, and it's something that we'll continue to invest in for the coming years.
Okay, perfect. One of the advantages of Singapore is its strategic location, placed in the most populous and fastest growing area in the world. The country is on a key trade route between giants like China, India, and Southeast Asia. Over time, the country has impressed the world with its high levels of education, how have it been said, health and economic competitiveness, and while attacking corruption. In the late 1990s, the country entered a new stage of economic growth, which led it to becoming a global financial center. Since then, it has not stopped growing. One of the advantages of the country is also having solid institutions that works, in addition to creating incentives to attract foreign companies with large offices of multinationals. Another factor was that it did not face major forces that tried to contain its development policy, and that it had protection from the United States. What are Singapore's strategic growth and investment goals for the coming years, Mr. Desmond?
Thank you, Mariana. Let me just clarify that Singapore does not enjoy protection from any one country.
Okay.
We cultivate good relations with all countries, including the major powers. And as I mentioned earlier, we make ourselves relevant, right? So that's why people want to do business with us. But doing that has allowed us to operate effectively in an increasingly complex geopolitical environment. But it has not and will not be easy for us to continue doing so. So in recent years, external demand has been weaker due to slowing global demand and also the uncertainty caused by rising trade tensions between the United States and China. There's also been structural changes in global supply chains and production patterns. And there's also a growing pushback against globalization and a slow erosion of the multilateral trading system. Now, as a small country with no natural resources, our priority is to continue to champion free trade and the multilateral trading system. So we support the World Trade Organization. We are doing our part to contribute to the establishment of rules in new growing areas like e-commerce and the digital economy. We will continue to invest in emerging sectors of the new digital economy, such as smart cities technology, artificial intelligence, digital trade, and other cyber-related infrastructure. This is so that Singapore will continue to keep abreast of fast-changing developments in the global environment.
I would like to make a compliment to this. Very, very clever answer. Very good answer. I enjoyed very much your answer, Mr. N. I would like to add to your points. Very interesting article by your Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Long, at Foreign Affairs. It's the July-August Yes, the July-August 2020 issue. Your Prime Minister wrote an article in Foreign Affairs exactly discussing the position of Singapore in this changing world, and particularly as regards the tension, the growing tension, I would say, because this is something that all analysts expected that will continue with the new administration. And apparently, Mr. Biden is escalating a bit the tension and, let us say, negative measures towards China. And I remember that your Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Long, had this very interesting image. He said, well, for Singapore, but actually for any Asian country, it's very sad to see the two superpowers going to a not positive relationship. It's like when two elephants fight, Asian countries are the grass. So we don't want the elephants to fight over, we are the grass. So we don't have, let us say, of course, in terms, in political terms, in geopolitical terms, we don't have a preference for China, either for China or for the US. We want good relations with both of them. We want they to have a reasonable relationship between them, and we want to have to trade and have good relations with both of them. That's what we want. We want I think it says this. It's a very interesting article. I would recommend everybody to read this. Foreign Affairs, July-August 2020, is by Prime Minister Lee Long. Very, very clever, as usual, coming from the Singaporean civil servant. And then I say, so the worst thing for us in the world would be a disruptive relationship between the US and China. And I think he's right. And it's not only Singapore, but we're talking about Singapore. You have, you mentioned keywords during our talk. It's an indispensable country, an attractive country. You're very efficient. You need value chains. You need trade. You are a fantastic platform. You are supporting the WTO. But unfortunately, we can't predict the future. On your Greece, you would go to Delphos, and then you would ask the oracle. But unfortunately, this is all over. So we have feelings. The present day feeling is that, at least in the short run, there will be a retreat, most from the US than from China, because China also doesn't want to sever relationship with the US. But there will be a retreat from the US, and this will maybe unavoidably, maybe also provoke a retreat from China. So relations will become at least colder or less intensive. I myself, I think that they will resume afterwards, because the degree of intermingling, of interconnection between the two superpowers, and you are an agent for this, you are one of the key pieces of this interconnection, is so deep and so profitable that I think that if the distancing goes too far, they will come back closer again. That's my view, but we don't know what's going to happen. But in principle, I will retake my point. In principle, in the short run, it is expected that the two superpowers will drift apart more. Well, this poses a problem for Singapore, because as you said, and as your Prime Minister said, you want to do business with both. You want good relations with both. How do you see, provided that what I said is going to take place, how do you see Singapore's strategy? Is it going to oscillate towards one of the superpowers instead of the other, or you are going to bravely and wisely, as you have always done, keep a neutral position and move on with business as usual as long as possible with both of them? What is your feeling about this coming reality, which is a bit unfortunate, I would say?
Thank you, Professor. I speak in my personal capacity because you are asking me for my view, and this is such a tricky, well, not tricky, but challenging question. We all know that the U.S. and China are in a very difficult position, and as my Prime Minister said, we don't want to be forced to take sides. I think that's probably the same position as Brazil. We don't want to take sides. They are our friends. And when our friends quarrel and fight, it's not good. We don't like to see it. And so I think what we have to do, what we must do, is to be an interlocutor, to be an intermediary. And Singapore is a small country, and sometimes we have to work. We have to work with our like-minded friends to convince both countries that it is much more profitable, much better if they could manage their differences. Of course, two big powers dealing with each other is so different from two normal countries, let's just put it that way, dealing with each other. They have a complex, wide variety of issues to deal with. It's not just trade, it's also many other things, geopolitics and everything, culture. But I think we need to do what we can individually as countries, and also together, maybe within the context of the United Nations and the WTO, to convince both the US and China that it is much better for global peace, for the global system, that they manage their differences. They will have differences. I don't see them resolving all their differences, but to manage their differences bilaterally and not allow their relationship to affect the world. We all want to be friends with US. We all want to be friends with China. And I don't think we should be forced to take sides, because that's just not fair. As you said, Professor, when two elephants fight, we all suffer, Yeah. So we rather that the elephants dance, and make friends, and then we'll all have a wonderful, a place to live in. And I think that should be the way. It's difficult, but I think we got to continue to try and keep on working and hope that cool heads prevail. And I like you, Professor. I'm optimistic. I'm more of an optimist, and I think it. As a famous philosopher once said, one must always hope. Hope is important. And hope will give you that strength and courage to to continue to persevere in that effort of reconciling and making peace. It's difficult, but I think we need to try.
That's wonderful, Mr. And I fully agree with you, and I was very glad to hear your answer, because I'm nurturing this idea that I think that if there is a distancing, if the things become in the short run a little more serious between the US and China, we should not forget the importance of middle powers. We are all middle powers, Brazil, Singapore, they are the elephants. We are all middle powers. And in case of a more unfortunate outcome, I think that we should join forces select middle powers which have a key role, like the Dragon City, in the world economy, in the world geopolitical system. We should make an alliance trying to mend things and trying to avoid a more disruptive outcome. I think this is very important, and I think we should keep in mind. And in this event, Singapore plays a very important role. It's very important, but you are so efficient, you became so attractive, so indispensable, that you are also indispensable as an element for helping, together with other middle powers, sustaining harmony, a minimum of harmony, and let us say, as the British say, speaking terms in the world order. That's very important. So I was very encouraged with your answer. Thank you very much. Well, I would like to continue. I would like to put on the table India and other things, but we are running out of time. So we'll try to have time for one question. I know that Mariana has a classical question at the end that she wants to ask you. So I would like once again to thank you very much for your wonderful participation. I'm sure that people who have been watching us, and you know that this becomes a video and it's watched several times afterwards, so there is an after effect which is very important. And I think that Mr. Drummond and you made a wonderful contribution in placing your country closer to a Brazilian audience. Thank you very much, because this is the spirit of our project, is to put Asia in the minds of our fellow Brazilians. And if you put Asia in the minds of our fellow Brazilians, you can't forget, you must put Singapore in the top position. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful. So in my name, in the name of my president, Professor Carlos Ivan Simon Real, we thank once again. We've had several exchanges with Singapore, and they have always been very profitable and interesting. Thank you very much. And the Focus on Asia project is delighted to have you in this chat. Mariana, please, your famous question.
Professor, thank you first for your important contribution. And Mr. Desmond, the last question, what are some ways we can deepen relations between Singapore and Brazil?
Thank you, Professor Flores. Thank you for those very kind remarks. And I hope I have done justice to this webinar by trying my best to share about Singapore and to promote understanding of Singapore and Brazil. And in response to your last question, Mariana, I would say that apart from strengthening government-to-government links and business exchanges, one key element in growing our relations is certainly to increase people-to-people exchanges. I think that's always so important because, again, as I mentioned earlier, the distance is a big challenge. Not many Brazilians go to Singapore, and likewise, not many Singaporeans come here. So right now, I would say that Brazilians know very little about Singapore. And at the same time, Singaporeans don't know much about Brazil beyond soccer, samba, and bossa nova. Those are worldwide. Everyone knows about that. For me, having more of exchanges, especially among the young people, will help to promote greater mutual understanding and create a conducive environment for greater links to flourish. And I think that would be the way for our relation to grow. But it will take time. But I believe that we should move in that way. Thank you.
Okay. Now I have a few questions, Mr. Desmond, from those who are joining us. And we have more than 100 interactions on LinkedIn alone so far, but I'm going to do one question from Mr. Juliana Pangoni, who is watching us on LinkedIn. She asked if young Singaporeans are aware of this economic and geopolitical future with the importance of transformation themselves day by day to be best. That is, if this mindset is part of the country's current culture.
Thank you, Marian. I'm trying to understand your question. The question is, are the young people of Singapore aware of what's going on in the world? Is that what the question is?
It's about Mr. Ng. She's asking whether the younger generation is aware of their responsibility as Singaporeans, because the country success is very successful, but success is very demanding. So she says, are they aware of the importance of transforming themselves day by day to be the best, to better serve the country? That is, so she wondered whether this mindset, which was in Honorable late Mentor Minister Lee Kuan Yew and in his generation, the other generation, your generation. So she wonders, what about the younger generation? Do they have the same drive? Are they aware of their responsibilities? Because this happens in many countries, we know.
Yes.
You have two generations who are the pioneers. They build up the country, and then the others, they just enjoy. They relax and enjoy, and they want to be. They don't want to be the best, to be always improving themselves for that. So it's a kind of cultural question. I think it's interesting. What about the younger generation? Are they enough?
Right, Professor.
Will they hold the flag the same way as your generation and the previous generations did?
Yes. Thank you, Professor. I think that's actually it's an excellent question, and I don't know whether I'm speaking for the young, because I don't think I'm speaking for the young because I'm not that young. Certainly, my parents generation had it very tough. And I am probably a beneficiary of the growth of Singapore, because I enjoyed a good education. And got a good job, and so I'm able to, so I'm a beneficiary definitely of the development of Singapore. My parents probably didn't benefit as much, but contributed to it. My children now have everything. They see Singapore, they've not had hardship, and so I think it's fair to say that it's a bit more difficult for the young to understand the sacrifices that the younger generation have made. We call them the pioneer generation, and so it's important that and I think it's not just the role of government to do that, but it's also the role of parents. Parents need to instill in their children, the qualities of hard work, diligence, sacrifice, and as Professor Flores said, it's actually more difficult because the young have had it so good. They've never had hunger. They've always had 3 meals on the table. They can, you go on holidays twice a year. So, and I never went on holiday until I was a teenager. And only to the neighboring country of Malaysia. But anyway, it's a challenge. I think that we are doing a decent job in trying to tell people that Singapore is it's a flourishing economy with a flourishing economy, but the challenges are there, and if we don't maintain that hard work, that diligence, that drive, it can easily just disappear overnight. Having said that, it's more difficult than convincing people like me, my generation. And so that's certainly the role of not just government, but parents, parents and people like us to instill in our children these qualities. And when you see, I like to say that Singapore likes to compare ourselves to Israel, because we are kind of in a similar position. We're small countries, surrounded by big countries. And so we take our independence very seriously, very, very jealously, in fact. And all of us, the men in Singapore, have to do military service. We all had to do 2.5. It's 2 years now, but I did 2.5 years of military service, and that's to instill in us that Singapore is a country worth fighting for. And I hope that kind of and maybe national service, we call it national service, has played an important role in teaching our young, that we need to fight. Well, fight as in fight. You need to fight for your country. You can't take your country's independence and prosperity for granted. There's a Chinese saying, famous Chinese saying that says the wealth of a family doesn't last 3 generations, something along those lines, And in Asia we take that very seriously, because as Professor Flores said, the wealth accumulated by a grandfather will be lost by the grandchild, if he's not careful. So we've got to be careful. Yeah, we've got to not take it for granted and work together to ensure that the gains that we have achieved over the years are maintained.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that the signs of your achievement, of the Singaporeans' achievement, are so evident all over the city, all over the country. The water you drink, that you take from salty water. So everything, the signs are so evident that let us hope that together with the parents, together with the decent and transparent state that you have, you've nearly banished corruption. That's very important for your credibility. That's very important indeed. So together with all those, the signs of your achievements will help to work as an incentive to the younger generation to keep on working and, of course, enjoying the fruits of development. Well, thank you very much once again. Please, I think that our time, Mariana, and Mr. Desmond also wants to say some final words. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Professor, for your participation. And Mr. Desmond, thank you very much for your presence. You had an excellent participation in this project. And thank you very much. Thank you for everybody.
Thank you, Professor Flores. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you. It was a privilege to have a chat with you and share my views. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.